Welcome in, everybody, to Sad Times. Yes, it's that time of the week again when you get to hear me say, welcome in my best radio voice. My name is Kevin. I'm the host of Sad Times. For those of you who have never listened to Sad Times, let me give you a little primer kind of on what it is. Each week, we have a guest on, and that person bravely shares times when they were sad, upset, angry, anxious, dealt with some really difficult things in life, and they tell their story about how they acted, how those around them acted sometimes. And the goal of Sad Times is not to fix it. It's not to solve the problem, nor is it to diagnose the problem. It's simply to allow for these people to tell their stories so that anybody who's listening, might feel less alone and realize, oh, I thought I was the only one who was going through whatever the speaker is speaking about. So that's kind of what the show is about. This week, we do have an interesting advertiser here. It is The Passage of Time. The Passage of Time is paid to be on the show. All right, let me see. Let me read this ad copy. We don't even know why we're expending capital to advertise on this program because there is nothing you can do to stop the passage of time. Not money, not silicon, not a podcast about sadness, nothing. Therefore, this will be the last week we sponsor this show or any show. We get enough free advertising lurking in the corners of each and every one of your listeners' existential dread. Wow. That's fucking intense, man. Well, at least we got them to sponsor one episode. Thanks, The Passage of Time, but no thanks for everything else, jerk. Okay, so that's our advertiser. And if you are interested in being on the show, you can always email sadtimeskc@gmail.com. Sad times K as in king, C as in cat @gmail.com. And if you are interested, we can let you know how it works and see if that's something that would work for you. But without further ado, let's get to this week's Jeff. This week's Jeff is a guest. This week's guest, his name is Jeff. How you doing, Jeff?
Hi, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm hanging in there.
That was a really good sponsorship. I have a sponsorship. It's called The Bitter End.
The Bitter End.
They don't ever really, they just kind of always block me off before they send me anything. So,
man, you'd think we'd learn, but hey, this is America, buddy. Advertisers forever. I'll take the money wherever I can get it,
That's right. A good lesson's never worth a nice time.
That's right. The Bitter End. So, Jeff, now you and I know we've spoken before, but I've never met you in person. So I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for reaching out and, expressing your interest in being on the show. Sure. And I'm really excited to talk with you today. So with that, let's get started again, since we don't know each other. Tell me about, where are you from? What was your childhood like? I know that's a very broad question, but we'll kind of start there and go from there.
Yeah. Well, just to give a heads up, I'm a retired combat soldier. Spent 18 years in the military, but going all the way back to the very beginning. I was born in New Jersey in the great year of 1977, where I always tell people the two best things that came out of 1977 was first Star Wars and then Star Wars. And so I was born then and basically a giant Star Wars geek, but grew up in New Jersey. And my childhood, it was one of those things where at the time you weren't sure if it was a good or bad childhood.
Yeah, because you couldn't this is just your reality, so you didn't, maybe it wasn't that bad.
I was kind of very aware very early on that, Full House was not really how life was.
What?
So I didn't have that misconception that I had a bad life because I didn't compare myself to what was on TV. So I didn't know. It took me to about high school when my friends would start telling me about how dysfunctional, I guess you could say, my home life was. So I grew up in a household that my mother had me at the age of 17, and she had gotten married a few years after having me, and her husband was nice enough guy. I have nothing bad to say about him in any aspects other than him being an enabler to my mother's alcoholism. But I had two younger sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, 1980s, early 1990s, going through back when alcoholism was really what the movies kind of show it is. It was a little rough growing up. So I mean, I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there.
What do you mean by that? You mean like back when it was What do you mean by that? When alcoholism was really alcoholism?
You remember, you really kind of like, they didn't really skirted around alcoholism in popular culture. If you remember, there wasn't a lot of openness about stuff like that. And every time you would see that, after school special about alcoholism, it was tampered down and toned down to just being a yelling father who's drunk and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays we have, a very open, woke society, and you see a lot of these horrific stories about mothers and fathers and kids and cousins and everyone that's getting drunk or some kind of drug abuse is going on somewhere. And it's a little more open. People kind of can see it now a little bit more, where back then it wasn't out there as much, in my opinion. I just don't think people knew. I wouldn't have known that my mom was an alcoholic until I got old enough to realize, because it's just the way she always was. And she wasn't as physically abusive. She did have her moments, but she was an expert at breaking down your soul with the things that she said to you. Even as a child, you could just, it would just tear right into you. And as a young child, your mother is everything to you. So
breaking like I said, down your soul.
Yeah. That emotional damage that they'll say.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. And this is a very open. I say this to everyone when they ask me, what do I mean about my mom being? So my mother was kicked out of her home by her father when she became pregnant with me.
Okay.
It was there was never I was never kept in the dark about, the fact that I was a illegitimate kid, but having your mom tell you should have been aborted, like everyone said, really cuts to the quick when you're, when a kid at like 7, 8, 9, 10.
She would say that too when you were, even before you were a teen. I mean, she should have, in my opinion, should have never said that.
Even before I knew what it meant, even before I knew what it meant. So that way, it was almost like that phrase hurt me more when in school I knew what that word meant. When I finally heard that word and got to describe what it was, that's when I had the emotional reaction. So I didn't even get hurt by it when she said it. It was later on when I learned what the word meant, which means she didn't have any indication at all that she was saying something to hurt you, because she knew I didn't understand it. She would just throw things out in anger, and it was. I'll be honest with you, it was just terrible. I mean,
what would be? Sorry to interrupt. What would be something that would maybe lead to that type of language from her?
Well, she worked. She wasn't like she was like, I would guess you could say she was a functional alcoholic. She would work and then she'd get home and she'd start drinking. And during the week wasn't so bad, but then on weekends she'd start earlier because she wasn't working. And at some point she would get angry at her husband, my stepfather, who adopted me. And once she got mad at him, it was all bets off for everybody else. Everyone was going to pay the price for whatever she got mad at him for. And so he worked nights, and he worked 7 days a week. So she would get mad at him. He would leave to go to work because he had to. And then he was gone. And who was going to take, who was going to be her sounding board? Who was going to be their, the person that she was going to go after? Well, at first it was me. And then as time went on and I got older, she would start to go after my sisters with it. And then now, like I said, she did be abusive physically at times. And it was generally when you stood up to her in any kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my sisters, I just didn't want them to go through all that. So I would plan out my evenings, generally middle school on, to know right when the moment was that I needed to press her buttons and get her to focus on me so that my sisters wouldn't get it.
It's almost like you at 7 p.m. or whatever the time was, you were like over here, like, look over here. I'm doing all these things so that you could draw the fire, for lack of a better term, from your.
It was more direct though. I mean, I would literally go and like engage her and provoke her on purpose, because I would see how the night was going to develop. My sisters were in their room away and everything was good, then I'd just let it ride. If she was angry with my sisters earlier in the day, she would go after them. And like I said, because I didn't know that I was in a bad household for years and years as a child, I'm so glad that my sisters were so much younger than me, because had they been closer in age to me, I wouldn't have known that she was doing the wrong thing. And I always think my one success as a child growing up was the fact that I was 6 years older than my next youngest sister, and that I was able to, at that moment, be able to be her big brother and be the person that protected them, which really was something I struggled with when I turned 17 years old, graduated from high school, and immediately left to go to the Army. And I mean immediately. I walked off my graduation field into a car to go to basic. I didn't have a day from the moment I got my diploma back in New Jersey. And I struggled with that all through basic, wondering, were my sisters now equipped enough to be able to deal with her, which scared me because the more you were able to deal with her, the more angry she got. Like she wanted someone to be hurting for, whatever her reasons were for that.
So were you dealing with a lot of guilt then, while you're at basic?
I think I felt more guilt over the fact that I felt like I got away. You know what I mean? Like
and left them there to deal with it?
Yeah, the weight off my shoulders and I got out of there kind of thing made me feel good. I was going into the world, getting away from my family. Now, this is the same family who Jeff gets accepted to Juilliard for acting, but they won't pay for me to go. So that's why I joined the Army. And so I had all that. And, do I join the Army almost to spite them? Like, oh, you won't let me go to Juilliard. You won't pay for me to go to Juilliard because you think acting is stupid. You know what? I'll join the Army. They tried to pretend like they didn't care or they didn't want me to do it, but I was 17 years old, so they had to sign for me to go into the Army.
Right.
And they did that. They did that willingly with no problem. So I never really got a good emotional. I never learned how to emotionally interact with other people, and spent much of my high school when I was old enough to do this at my friend's house.
Yeah, and something you said a minute ago, like I'm going to paraphrase it a bit, but you said one of the only successes of your childhood was that you were able to help divert anger away from your sisters. I totally understand that. It made me think of a Flannery O'Connor quote, which I'm going to butcher, where she said something to the effect of, anybody who survives childhood has enough material to write for the rest of their lives. And I think it's a good reminder that for somebody who, it sounds like you had to learn a lot of ins and outs that a lot of people maybe on that block, hopefully children on that block were not having to learn. So I think, just to give you a outside looking in, like I think you did a lot that a lot of people maybe would not be able to do. So kudos to you for that. You said you went into the Army.
Yep.
Did that immediately change like your feeling about yourself? Like, did it give you more drive, more self-esteem, et cetera?
Initially, no. So when I first joined, I wanted, everybody wants to do something more. They want to be something cool. And I feel like, I know me and Brent are close to the same age. I know you're probably about the same age. We grew up in the time of Arnold Schwarzenegger and
you're goddamn right we did.
All that kind of stuff. And so like Rambo and all them movies, it was always like, that's what's cool about being in the military. But you look at that, those movies, and you're not Sylvester Stallone, you're not Rambo. So there's no way you're going to be able to do that. I mean, you've been told your whole life that you're worthless, that you should have been aborted, because your parents didn't have you do extracurricular activities to support it. You didn't play sports a lot. So you didn't get early athletic development. Like it's all my major athletic development, 150 pound, skinny little 5'8" kid who was not bullied in high school, but I wasn't the popular kid either. I was kind of like in the middle. And I go off to the Army and everyone's like, he joined the Army. And so I tried to sign up for the best that I think I could do. And they said, oh, you can go airborne. You can jump out of planes. And I was like, well, how hard is that going to be for me to do it? And being a recruiter, they were like, oh, you can do anything you want. And at the time, I just thought it was a recruiter saying you can do anything you want.
Be all you can be, as the saying goes.
But he was right. Yeah, I love the be all you can be thing. It's my favorite slogan because it really is not be all you can be, but be all you want to be. Right. So I got there and I got through basic training, got through advanced training to be a combat medic, which is what my MOS was going to be at the time, go to airborne school. And I graduated airborne school and I get sent to the 82nd Airborne Division in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I was so amazed that I made it it didn't feel like it was that hard to do it when I just said, I'm just going to not quit, which, in basic training, you can't quit anyway, but airborne school, you can quit if you want. And I didn't. So I was like, well, if I didn't quit that, I wonder if I could do something else. And so every time I found a new higher calling, I can't be a Green Beret. It's not going to happen. I'm not Sylvester Stallone. So all I'll do is I'll go be a Ranger because they're like a next step down kind of thing.
They're a step down from Green Berets. Forgive my ignorance.
Nowadays, they're kind of both tier 1 units.
Okay.
They're both on their own level. But, Green Berets are 12 men on a team in the jungle by themselves, where Rangers are platoons they're just the best of the infantry kind of stuff. And I was already airborne, so I qualified to go. And I went to what's called RIP, which is Ranger Indoctrination Program. Be honest with you, this is 4 years after I had joined the Army. I'd already been in the Army 3 years. Note to self, I'm already married at this point because I found someone that didn't say that I should have been aborted. So I married her right away. And I joined the Rangers, and I go out to Seattle, the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and I get there, and I'm doing well there, and go to Ranger School and do all. And then I finally, after 6 years in the Army, I finally said, well, you know what? Let me just see if I can do it. And what I'm talking about is going to be Sylvester Stallone, going to be a Green Beret. And so at that point, I left and went to Special Forces Assessment and Selection, which is a 31-day walk through human hell on earth to just see. And it's basically just designed to throw as many different physical and mental stressors on you and try to get you to quit and try to see how do you react under these physical and mental stressors. And I'm going to tell you what, as much as my depression and my lack of self-confidence and everything that came from my parents, as much as that was on me, what they taught me was that I can endure almost anything. So I just won't quit, because if I quit, then you win. You can say whatever you want to me. You can break me down. And this literally was my wife told me once, she was, everything you do is to prove your mom wrong on some level. She's like, what are you going to do when you don't have that anymore? So
did you know how to answer that question for a while?
I still don't know how to answer that question because I made it. I got selected. I became a Green Beret, and
wow.
And immediately, as soon as when I was in the Green Beret training program, is when 9/11 happened. So, it's like just about the time of my life where I was starting to really understand who I was and be kind of content with who I was. And note to self, I don't have a relationship with my family at this point because I don't talk to my mom because of who she was.
Wait, so you're sorry to interrupt you, Jeff. So you're about 24 at this time?
26.
26. Okay. And so also
when I finished the Q course, I was 26. It's a 2-year course.
Another thing that you and Brent have in common is Brent has a green t-shirt on and you're in the Green Berets. So it's like the same thing, right?
Yeah, no, it's green clothing.
Green clothing. And also to anybody out there who doesn't think that they can be a cop and pose as a kindergarten teacher, I'm here to tell you that you can. Richard Kimball is a hero. Anyway, okay. So 9/11. Yeah. Oh, it's not a tumor. 9/11 happens. You are already an active Green Beret when that happens?
No, 9/11 happened when I was in training.
When you were in training, excuse me.
Okay. Yeah, so I was in the Q course is broken up into a bunch of separate schools that are all qualifiers for you to be awarded the Green Beret and given your Special Forces tab. And I was in the second phase. So a selection had happened. I got selected. The next phase is what's called small unit tactics. It's basically Ranger School again, but done for SF guys. And it was during that program that I was there the day that 9/11 happened. Now, so basically, while you guys all saw 9/11 happen on TV, I never saw it on TV. We're isolated in training out at this fort, Camp McCall out here in North Carolina, and you don't have access to a TV, but you do have access to radios. So we heard everything that happened, but we never saw it. And we were still only 2 weeks into the being out there of a 6-week lockdown. So 4 weeks later, when I got out, much of the worst stuff that you guys had seen on TV, I never saw.
You've never seen like the planes hitting the towers.
I've seen the footage of it since then, but there's a lot of like the people jumping and all the stuff that happened live. I never experienced any of that. So all my experience with 9/11 was just that I knew that I had to get finished so I could go to war. And because I was a medic beforehand, I was going to be in the medical course and be a Green Beret medic. I actually went to them and said, look, I can't spend another 3 years here for that because that course is long. Regardless of the fact that I'm like 4 credit hours from being a physician's assistant, I want to go be a weapons sergeant because it was shorter. And they said, no, they're like, you're the highest qualified guy for going to the medic course. And I'm like, I'll quit then. And they're like, okay, then go to the one course. And so I went to that one and got out of Green Beret training earlier than I would have, about 2003. And and right about that time, I guess I'm assuming because they know that war is coming for it, my parents try to reach out and reconcile with me.
So let me interject there real fast, Jeff, and I apologize.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, had you told your parents you weren't going to speak with them anymore?
We had a falling out sometime when I think it was right before I left to go to Ranger Battalion. They were upset about something or another, probably the fact that I got married and didn't tell anybody about it. But my mother had just said some really ugly things to me on the phone one time, and I hung up on her, and I just didn't talk to her again. And she would, they would call and they would try to get in touch with me, but I just wouldn't pay them any attention. I get done with the Green Beret course, get back, and my wife's aware. My son is at this point 4 or 5, and she's like, "Look, you got to say something. You got to say something to him. There's no closure there." She goes, "You need to either talk to them and tell them that you're done with them, or you need to talk to them and try to work it out, because you're going to go off, and I'm going to be." And basically, she was like, "I'm going to be the one here who is now going to be the person that has to deal with them." Just because I am not going to be she's a military brat. Her dad was in the Army. She's like, "I'm not going to ignore your parents when you're off fighting in a war."
Had they been reaching out to her as well to try to talk to you?
I had to assume that they might have, because that would be really the only, they had really, my mom hated her. As much as my mom went after me about stuff, I was her only son. And so everything, the cliche-ish mama's boy thing applied. So she wasn't going to like anyone I got married to, but especially someone who literally was the complete opposite of her. Was a caring person who really thought about other people, was not raging alcoholic. When she got angry, she worked it out in a meaningful, effortful way, like a constructive way, not a destroying you with words or worse way. So like first time she ran at her, my mom had a run at her. And she handled my mom in a way that I'd never seen her before. She was like, "I understand you're angry. Please stop saying hurtful things." And that like set my mom off. And I was just like, well, you know what? I'm like, you dealing with her so calmly made it worse for her. But
right. Maybe she wanted the exact opposite, the reaction to show that maybe she was getting under her skin, and that would show that she had accomplished something. Yeah.
My mom was an expert at that. It was one of the things that really drove me in my special operations stuff, was that I knew how to get under people's skin, because I learned from the best person in the world how to do that. So.
Right. So did you reach out to your mom and speak with her before you were deployed?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And they came down and visited, and there was it was like everything was good. It was very much that whole battered wife syndrome kind of thing where, they promise they'll never be that way again. And everything was nice and good. And it was all good because there was nothing there that was a challenge. I was going off to war. I had to focus. They were the family that had the kid going off to the war. I didn't realize till later that it was all about my mom being a victim. Like I found out later that she was like telling everyone, "Oh, my son, blah, blah, blah." It's like she was using me as like a cause for people to feel bad for her, which always annoyed me. But hey, that's whatever you got to do to get through it, Mom. That's fine. Do that. And I was all right with it at the time. Note to self: this relationship with my mother doesn't end up good in the end of this story. So I find all this stuff out later on, after the second time that I cut ties with her.
Well, I guess we'll hop ahead. When was the second time you cut ties with her?
My wife, note to self: I had been deployed. Now we're jumping ahead another 8-9 years.
Sure.
I've had 8 deployments, or no, I'm sorry. I've had 4 deployments of my total of 8.
Jeez.
At the time. And I had taken a break. The Army had been, we had a lot of guys deploying all the time. And as an SF guy, you don't deploy for the 18 long deployments, that a lot of these 18-month, 12 to 18-month deployments. We would go for 6 months, come back, go back in for 6 months. And the reason why they did that is because we had our op tempo was so much higher than the standard unit. An 18-month tour for a infantry unit in Afghanistan, you're going out and doing a mission every week or 2 weeks. We go as special forces, we're going out every day.
Wow.
And you're going out every day with just 12 guys, maybe 6 guys, with your local fighters that you're working with, or doing your direct action missions, going after high value targets. So you're constantly ongoing. And when the infantry group, and this is every soldier that serves has a hard time. I don't want anyone to think I'm saying that we had it worse than them, but they had a much higher casualty rate, but we had a debilitating casualty rate, because when you have a 40-man unit and you lose someone, 38 men are almost enough to get the job done. When you have 12 men and one IED kills 3 of the men on your team, you're now down to, below 10, and you're not getting pulled out of country for losing 3 guys that you're literally brothers with, because you're with them every moment of every day, and you put your lives in their hands. So we have, emotionally, it drags us, but we're not allowed to be emotional because we have a job to do. So there was a lot of emotional stuff that was building up. And at the time I felt like I was handling well, and I was handling as well as anyone else. So I get home. I'm home for a year and a half because they made me an instructor to teach people because they wanted everyone to have a break. And towards the end of it, my wife gets pregnant again. And this time, my parents are talking with us. We have a relationship at this time for this much. We hadn't spoken to them when my son's pregnancy had come all the way through. They met my son when he was a year old already.
Okay.
And my mom starts being, I don't know if it was over like being helped. She wanted to be more of a part of the whole process. But I mean, I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm not even exaggerating how this goes. My mother wants to buy a bassinet. She's like, I'm gonna get you guys a bassinet. And this is what my wife said. Ellen, we didn't use a bassinet. Why don't you use whatever money you were going to use in the bassinet, get something else that we're going to use? Because I don't want you to waste your money on something that we're going to use. And I don't want to force us to use it because it'll be disingenuous. That was what she said to her.
Okay.
And to me, that's a very reasonable explanation, and not turning it down, not shitting on what you want to give us. But it was hey, look, we don't want to hurt your feelings by not using it, but we don't want to take it. We don't want you spending the money on it. We want you to, if you want to do help, spend it on something else. Well, my mother turns that into my wife being a horrible person. And she goes after my wife one night when I'm at work, and my wife had to get blunt with her. And my mother told her basically the thing about that she said to me when I was a kid about abortion, except she said it to my wife about my wife and her 2 kids, who are my 2 kids, by the way.
Wait a minute. Sorry. I need to make sure I'm understanding. She said that she thought her grandkids should have been aborted.
She said, because you and your 2 fucking kids are waste of life and should go away. That's what she said to her.
Holy shit.
So my wife tells me this, and I'm like, oh no. I'm like, no. Now my parents had moved down to North Carolina where I live. I get in my car and I go to that house, and there is a look in my stepfather's eyes. And I would say, other than him being an enabler, my stepfather was a very caring person. I think his enablement of my mom was because he was such a gentle soul.
Okay.
He just didn't know how to stand up for himself.
Okay.
His face said he knew it. He knew what I was there for. He could see it in my eyes. Now I'm in combat 4 times. I had changed over the years into someone that when I kind of looked serious, you really knew I was not the guy to push back on. Not that I was unstable or violent, but I had a very clear, I wasn't going to tolerate certain things. And I told them bluntly, I was like, I do not want to hear or see you ever again. I'm like, my children are not going to have exposure to the shit you did to me. I'm like, you can stop drinking and get help, or you're not going to see me and my kids and my wife ever again.
And what was her response?
She poured herself another Jack Daniels.
Okay. Did she say cutting things to you at that time?
No, for sure. At that time she did. But okay. I think I had gotten to the point in my life where her words really didn't. I mean, she had said so many horrific things to me that nothing she could have said then would have hurt me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, so.
And then, so how old are you?
She tried her best.
At this point? Sorry.
30, 31.
Okay. So about 13 or 14 years after you left, they'd come back into your life. And so how old was your son at this point? Do you recall?
Yeah. My son at this point is 7 or 8. My daughter now is 16, and they had never met my daughter. So we're talking about maybe 16, 17 years ago. It was right when my wife was about 3 months from giving birth.
Okay. So you said that. Did you ever speak with your mother again?
Not one word.
And is she still living?
No, my mother passed about 2 months ago.
Wow. Well, everything that you said, I am sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you.
And were you still in contact with your sisters?
That's a good question. So,
thank you.
My sisters, along this whole trip and everything, they were stay at home. They were adults, but still in early 20s. They had moved down with my parents.
Okay.
When I wasn't speaking to my mom, I couldn't speak to them. And the reason why was because if I spoke to them, she would find out and she would go after them for it. So I had to make a really hard decision to not have anything to do with my sisters. And my older sister, the closest one to me in age, the one that's 6 years younger than me, about 4 or 5 years ago, she started to reach out to me. But it was very strange. She would reach out to me when she was having conflict with my mother. And what it was she had realized that she was going through the same thing I went through. And so she would reach out to me as kind of like a support system. And I made it very clear to her that I was devastated that I not seen my sisters, that my sisters had not seen their niece and nephew, and that they had kids at this point that I had not ever met. But I made it clear to them that they have to realize that although I did interact with them when they wanted to, and they were well welcome to take the chance. They were old enough to make their own decisions about what my mom thought about what they did. I'm like, but I said, I will not think bad of you if you don't reach out to me or talk to me, because I understand what's going on with her. I get it. I'm like, I am not so blinded by my own ability to cut her off that I realize that that's easy. It's not. I'm like, so I don't fault you for not reaching out to me when you want to, because she'll find out you'll get some shit from it. But when she got close, she was diagnosed with cancer, I guess, a year ago. My older sister started hinting about, when she gets close, are you going to come? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, it would be unfair for me to show up and make that situation about that when I had been gone for so long, for two reasons. One, because you're the ones who are going to grieve her the most, and you guys deserve to have that time. And two, because it doesn't change what she did. I'm one of these people that really holds on to the whole. I get very not irritated. I don't want to shit all over someone who died, but I don't think what they did in life is erased just because they die. We all die. Everyone has that end. So no one gets a pass on the way they acted in life just because they're dying. And you may have a realization of the bad things you've done. I don't know if she did or not, because I never spoke with her. But I also didn't find out that she had died for a week.
And you found out from your sisters, yes, I assume?
Because my wife made them tell me.
Okay. So they contacted your wife, but not you.
No. My wife contacted them.
How did your wife know?
My wife had seen it on Facebook.
I see. Okay.
And she had saw it. My son and my daughter both knew, and they watched me. They literally observed me to see if there was any indication that I knew about it. And a weekend had gone by, and then I guess it was a Monday morning, 4 days after she had died. And I guess my wife had called my sister and said, "Hey, you need to tell your brother." And her answer to my wife was, "But he doesn't care." And she's like, "That is absolutely not true." She goes, "He does care. And that's not your decision to make for him, to whether or not he gets to have that information." And so she told me, made it very clear she didn't make it clear. There was some tone and some ways that she had said things, feeling like they had said to me, they understood that I wasn't going to be there at the end. That didn't come, that things had changed when it confronted with that situation, that I should have come running and forgiven her at her deathbed. And I just wasn't, I just can't do it. And so I was like, I understand you might feel a little upset by this, but I'm like, please, make sure that you reach out to me if once everything is happened and everything settles down and a couple of weeks go by, maybe we can start to work on a relationship. Well, that was 2 months ago, and I've heard nothing from them.
Okay. Well, how are you doing with the loss of your mother?
I don't know. I mean, 90% of what my sad times thing is comes from PTSD from all my times in combat. And I have to be careful about what I identify as conflicting me at certain times. Because I did have almost a break in reality kind of breakdown when I first started developing PTSD symptoms after I was injured.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you said, you had 8 deployments. And you were tell us what your injury was and what happened.
Sure. So
please.
just a little bit of background. On my first deployment, the invasion of Iraq, which my first deployment, I was awarded a Silver Star. And on that deployment, 3rd Special Forces Group, which was a newer group in the Special Forces community, I was one of 2 people who got the Silver Star for the Battle of Adamec, and we were the 2 highest awarded members of that unit in that unit's history.
Wow.
So there was a big deal made of it. We got treated like you would, like almost like you're a rock star kind of thing, where people, rolled out the red carpet. Everyone wanted to talk to you. I was in the New York Times. I got pinned my award in the Pentagon. General Schumacher, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, pinned my award on me. I did interviews and papers. There's books that I'm in and all this other stuff. So I get to go do pretty much whatever I want. So I chose to go do these jobs that were massively high risk, like direct action and battlefield interrogation and, small units that are even smaller than 12 men kind of stuff. And I developed a lot of experience. And then one day, right before my last deployment, not right before my last deployment, but a year out from my last deployment, I decided for some reason inside, now, just so I don't beat around the bush about it, I've killed a lot of people. There is something that happens to you when you do that.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's easy or not, I don't have, let me make it clear, I have no guilt. But there is something that's taken away from you. There is something that you do one of 2 things. You either become really, really pleased with yourself over it and become a horrible person and a monster, or you become somebody, you're become a shell of yourself, I guess is the other word. You're not really the same person that you were. And so I had this epiphany. I just didn't want to drop the hammer. I didn't want to kill anyone anymore. I said, I want to do something that's going to save lives rather than take lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the Special Forces dog trainer school and I became a dog handler looking for IEDs.
Really?
And so that's really cool. I was also the first 3rd Group Special Forces dog handler. So I get this highly trained dog, and now I'm gone through this highly trained course at, oh, by the way, the same place that if you go and see John Wick 4, the dog that's in John Wick 4 came from the same guys who trained me. They're the guys who do all the dogs for Hollywood now too, because of all the stuff. These are the same guys who put the dog teams on the Osama bin Laden mission and the dog teams on the Saddam Hussein mission, which I may or may not have been a part of. And that's as far as I can say about that.
Okay.
But I go and I deploy and with this dog, and I'm expecting, because after so many deployments, you kind of know that you're running. I never got injured. I've been shot a couple times. When I say injured, I mean I got hit in the body armor with rounds. I got scuffed up, blown up, concussions, little small things like that. I had kind of thought, I'm like, this is going to be the deployment that I buy it on.
Was that just like a premonition you felt? Like, hey, I'm going to work to save people.
I just felt like it was, when you play the odds too long, the house is going to win.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I was winning too much money, and that ball wasn't going to drop in black next time. It was going to drop in, in the red or on that green fucking 88 thing or whatever. And that's exactly what happened. 6 months into the deployment, after me and the dog had found 38 IEDs at what was called Firebase Cobra, which was the IED friggin' mecca of all Iraq, Afghanistan. We had gotten a tire shot out during an ambush, and we stayed where we were at, where the rest of the team went to go confront the enemy. But the enemy had backtracked around because they were targeting the dog team because we were defeating them with our ID detection. And while engaging them, while they were trying to attack us while we were changing our tire, an RPG hit the 240 machine gun that I was firing and threw me off, and I landed on my head and got a traumatic brain injury and a broken back. And so I had to get medevaced off of the field back, and with all my explosive exposures, it wasn't just a standard concussion.
Okay.
It was what they call a grade 4. I had problem with speech, where I would speak and in my head I would hear my voice saying the words. My wife would have to put on the audio notes on our phone, record what I say, and then play it back to me into where I sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Like
I was
that,
just like,
like
yeah, I
that.
was like, and I was trying, it just sounded like somebody who had lost the ability to speak. And
But to you,
I
you
had
think
to,
you're saying, "Hi, could you please pass the
as
milk?"
I'm saying it, yeah, as I'm
Yeah.
saying it, I can hear in my head the words right. When it was played back to me is when I could hear, oh shit, that is that what it sounded like? And so I go into therapy for that, but I've also got other brain injury stuff. So wake up on a Saturday morning like it's a Wednesday morning, and I
Mm-hmm.
get in my uniform and I leave the house and I drive and I stopped at a local food line, a grocery store, because I forgot that I was going to work on a day that I wasn't supposed to go to work, and sat in the parking lot of Food Line for 8 hours because I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. And I was too embarrassed to go home and admit that, because I knew that I was on that borderline of being medically that we got to medically retire you.
Right.
And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to come off of being on a team because, note to self, I started to feel better and normal in combat and felt strange and afraid at home.
Why do you think that is?
I know why that is. So,
Why is that?
I mean, it took years for them to explain to me, but the best therapist I ever had explained this to me. PTSD manifests itself in two ways. The trauma of the experience causes you to have hyper sensitivity to fight or flight hormones when they get released, and you become fearful, guilt-ridden, and introverted.
Mm-hmm.
Or you start to have your cortisol levels shoot up when you go to combat. That's fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
When you're over there, they kind of stay up there the whole time. And much like when you take drugs and your dopamine levels rise, your body starts to get a new normal of what the level of those hormones are supposed to be at. So when you get off of drugs and that dopamine level crashes, you go through withdrawals. Well, when you come back from combat into a normal, safe environment, your cortisol levels drop and you start going into withdrawals. And those withdrawals are what people nowadays would identify as PTSD. So basically, you become addicted to combat.
Now, is this something that was talked about before you went over there, or was it something that you figured out after you were? Yeah.
We all know that it was a dirty secret about people having PTSD and shell shock and combat fatigue, or whatever friggin' buzzword is what they call it nowadays. That we were still in a world where that makes you weak, that makes you soft. You can't have that. Or if you do have that, you're just going to suck it up and move through it. You don't feel good when you're at home and you feel better in combat. Well, shit, man, we'll put you on a bird. We'll send you back over there. You can go fight again. That's the same as telling a heroin addict when they're going off heroin, oh, you don't feel good, man? Here's just a little bit of heroin, just make you feel better. It's the same thing. It's just you're perpetuating the thing that's causing the problem. And no one's at fault for it. It was a cultural feeling of this. You don't admit to this stuff. But I started having some real issues that my wife was not going to just let go.
Well, of course, like one of them being you, that very sad and terrifying story that you sat in the parking lot for 8 hours. Did she try to call you? Like, were you able to talk with her when you were there?
She was calling me the whole time. I was just not answering. And when I finally got home, it was at that moment where I had to tell her, I'm like, I know that I'm still recovering. I'm like, but I'm afraid that my memories and my ability to be normal are not going to come back. Now, 10 years ago, when you got a head injury and got brain damage, that was you for the rest of your life. And the one thing that's good about the wars that we fought these last 20 years is that with all the head injuries, they have learned that if you get certain treatment within a certain amount of time from the injury, which is 21 days, if you get started into a treatment program within 21 days that focuses on rewiring your brain to relearn things that you're no longer able to do because the wiring is fucked up, you can recover to maybe close to how good you were before. Now, I still to this day have sometimes massive, migraines. I will every once in a while have a seizure, but I was a borderline here and there college class taking person back then.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a master's degree and I was able to do that quickly. The reason why is not because I became bigger, better, stronger, because they put me through the $6 million man program, but because the brain training that they gave me taught me new ways to learn and new ways to memorize things. And those ways were probably something I should have probably learned when I was a kid, because I mean, I can memorize shit like no one's business now.
Yeah, and especially if you were an actor, right? You got to learn those lines.
That was one of the big things that really bothered me, was that for someone who could memorize a soliloquy from Shakespeare in a 6-hour time period, verbatim, and do it better than Mel Gibson in Hamlet. I went from that to not remembering the words to an Alice in Chains song. Now, so you understand this, I'm like a teenage girl with a pop star with that band, right? That's my guy. So it's my favorite band.
What's your favorite Alice in Chains record?
Dirt is the best Alice in Chains record.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Dirt is really great.
I really do like Facelift, but Dirt is the friggin' gold standard. So, matter of fact, if we had cameras on, I could show you my Funko Pop setup with the Dirt album thing up here.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I got.
Okay, so your favorite band, it'd be like if I forgot words to a Beatles song. Right.
Or here's even worse. I know that the Beatles are the best rock band ever, but when I had my head injury, I was confused and thought that it was actually Elvis Presley. So, I mean, that's the kind of shit that the brain injury did to me. You know what I mean?
I knew there was a reason I had you on, Jeff. Yeah. Brent, God damn it, stop shaking your head. Okay, so other than that, it's quote unquote inconsequential to forget lyrics to a song, but it's terrifying when it's something that means that much to you. Were there other issues?
This is the one that broke my heart. When I got off the plane coming back from Afghanistan, I had turned to the guy that was walking me up to the hospital, because I had to get walked around because I had broke my back in 4 places. I said, "Hey, there's my wife. Who is she babysitting those kids for?" Once I realized that I was looking at my kids and I did not recognize my own kids, I'll tell you, man, I bawled for like 12 hours. That was when I knew my head injury was real. I didn't know how bad it was, but I knew my head injury was real when I didn't recognize my own kids. I knew that my PTSD was bad when I started hearing and imagining shit, like legitimately when your brain starts to betray your own senses, when you've had none of those issues before. I never had like hearing noise, or I never imagined shit or and these kind of things that were happening to me felt so real that nowadays, if it happened, I'd be able to identify it as a side effect and be like, that's, and I can, once you recognize and calm yourself down, things work out. When you don't know and you're first going through them, and your senses are what you relied upon as a special operations combat veteran for your whole life, it was the darkest. And sad to say, I don't have a feeling of, why did you do that to guys who commit suicide? I have a feeling of, I know what it was like and why you did it.
And when you say guys who committed suicide, you mean people who are struggling with PTSD?
Yes.
And do you feel that we as a society talk about PTSD enough, or allow people to feel, what's the word I'm looking for? To feel normal and not worse than for going through that?
I think we're better. We're better than we were.
And why do you think that is?
Because I'm able to get on here and talk to you about it without fear of feeling shamed. That in and of itself is one of two things. One, I don't give a fuck if someone doesn't like what I have to say. This is my story, and there's other people out there that need to hear it. But two, there's enough people now who know, who understand that it doesn't mean that I'm broken. It doesn't mean that I'm weak or that I'm a coward. What PTSD is a normal reaction to being put in an extraordinary circumstance. It is not an extraordinary reaction to a normal circumstance. War is not normal. Being in combat, taking lives that have nothing to do with your ability to survive or to find food or to be animalistic and dominant, and just doing it for political reasons or just any kind of reasons a war goes on. That's not normal. You're biologically not designed to kill your own species like that. And it damages people. It rips the ethical and moral soul that you have out of you. And it's either going to make you a monster, or it's going to make you feel like you've done monstrous things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no in between there. And there's a lot of guilt over the fact that you've done something that makes you feel a certain way, not the guilt over doing it. Because they do a very good job psychologically when they're looking for SF guys to find guys who can handle being violent and handle doing violence on people. And that was the big thing that I really had to get past with it. Was this doesn't mean that I'm broken or that I have guilt over killing someone who was going to kill me, or, someone who picked up a gun and decided they wanted to play soldier, and so they're not innocent bystanders. But then there's also, when you can't deal with those incidents of taking people's lives, then when you do have that collateral damage, or you do that have fog of war, mishap, then it becomes so much worse. And I'm lucky to have only had a very few of those. But even those few to this day, they stay with me. There's some out there that are just never going to go away.
And so with the PTSD diagnosis, obviously the horrifying memory problems, and I will say that the fact that you were, that, they got, I believe you said within 21 days, it would be so debilitating to me to be told, like, if I couldn't remember things. And so kudos to you for one, going with the treatment, and two, getting a master's degree. When you have PTSD, are you having panic attacks a lot as well as hearing things?
Oh yeah. I've got, now you're hearing the beginning of my story. It's clear to me now as an adult and an emotionally aware person that I'd struggled with depression my whole life. Part of my lack of self, esteem, and not knowing how to deal with people in a meaningful way in a relationship, because I was never taught that. All of that stuff made me a damaged person before I even got those things, before I even was exposed to the stuff that gave me PTSD. So, not that made me more susceptible to it, but again, just like PTSD is more talked about nowadays, I think the fact that, in my opinion, everyone's got something. No one's perfect. There's people out there that do a really good job of hiding it. But we're Americans specifically are very, it's how you present yourself to the rest of the world society. You've got to look a certain way. You've got to project a certain amount of stuff. We see it with social media, with how everyone on social media looks like they have a perfect life. We those of us who are initiated, as I like to say, we know that that's not true. Because I get people all the time are telling me, like, oh man, you got a really nice job. I listen to your podcast, you do, and listen to you on other podcasts, and you sound like you really got it all together. And I'm like, oh man, I'm like, you have no idea. I'm like, I don't. I'm as damaged as everyone else. I struggle with getting out of bed every single day, finding a reason to get up and not allow my feelings or my chemical imbalances is to make me quit. And which is the only thing I really maintained, was that I'm not going to allow something that there is a way to treat to be ignored and then to defeat me because I ignored the treatment out of fear of what it looked like. And thank God that all of us of our generation didn't have to relive what those guys in like Vietnam or World War II did.
Yeah.
Because that's why they're so bad now. Yeah. And, I just won't do that. I love my kids and my wife, and I love my life too much for that to happen. Yes, I know I don't have complete control over it. No one does. But you have to admit that to begin with, that you don't have control over everything that goes on. You cannot control the world around you or how people react or do things. You can only control how you let it affect you. And not even affect you, but you can only really control how you react to it. It's going to affect you one way or the other. I feel bad about certain things that I can't control, and I feel bad. But what I can do is not let that keep me from getting the help I need, talking to someone, opening up about it, or pushing through how I feel to not let it stop me from living my life still.
Yeah. And the same thing I said earlier on when I said, you did a lot as a kid really well. I just want to stop and point out and give you immense credit for, again, one, admitting that every day is a struggle, and two, saying I'm not going to let it defeat me if there's a way that I can fix it. As somebody who has anxiety and depression, that is not an easy thing to say.
No.
Especially when dealing with these things on a day-to-day level, and where you broke your back in 4 places, and sometimes I accidentally cut my fingernail a little too close and it hurts, so that's my problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I had those same things because one of the things that I really, and even now I struggle with this very, very much, is I have friends who are double amputees. I have friends who are horribly scarred from burns, and you've not met me, but Brent can tell you that if you look at me and just look at me, there is nothing physically wrong with me. But the damage that I have is just as bad, if not worse, because I don't have the world identifying that person has got some shit they're working through.
Right.
That person's got some things that are affecting their ability to do the same things I do. We don't have that when we have these internal injuries. What we have is a world that looks at us like, what are you complaining about? What do you have to complain about? And you have to stop and be like, I'm not complaining. This is just a fact. And I have to live with this, but my life doesn't get better by the world ignoring that this occurs. We only get better, and we only set it up for the next generation of people to not have it as bad as we had it, and we don't have it as bad as people had it before. But if we don't keep progressing to the point and start making things okay to talk about, okay to admit, okay to have, because you're not Superman, no one is, no matter how much they want to be, then we're failing at like self-identifying what it is that we have issues with and treating other people that way. And I understand what people's problems are with that when they say, it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with you. You're right, it doesn't. So that makes it so much worse that there is something wrong, because it doesn't look that way. But yeah, that's the thing I struggle with, is that sometimes I'll look at someone and be like, man, that guy's got it worse than I ever had it. But he doesn't. He has it just as much as I do. Just there's no fixing some of the things that we have damaged.
You said a lot there in about the last minute and 20 seconds. And I wanted to pause and just point out how astute that is and how much I, personally agree with that. And as you're coming back with this horrible, broke your back in 4 places, horrible brain injury, did you have what's the word I'm looking for? Unhealthy ways that you were coping not only with the pain, but with the guilt and all of the attendant problems that PTSD presents? And if so, what were those?
So broken back in 4 places, totally a candidate for pain management while you're injured. So my injury happens in 2009, and I get medically retired in 2011, temporary, and then full medical retirement in 2013. But we don't have this whole wide knowledge of our opium epidemic really kick in till about 2012.
Okay.
So right about the middle of my whole thing. At that moment in 2012, I had been on pain meds since 2009 for broken back, for now what is considered to be a back that probably needs to be had fused, but I still haven't had that done yet. But I wasn't. My wife always tells me, she goes, you're not lying about what you say. She goes, when you tell people who don't understand, she goes, you have to be very careful how you explain this. I was dependent on the drugs, and I took them at the prescribed dosages I was supposed to take, but I didn't cross over to being physically addicted or going out of control, but I still had any problem because I was dependent on this stuff. I was taking the meds far longer than I probably should have. And I saw some people, and because I had stopped drinking for the whole time I was injured, and now I'll have a drink or two, but when I was younger, I was very much at risk of being just like my mom, because I would drink every night. But young people being what they are, that's when we're supposed to be that way. I had quit drinking because I didn't want to. I saw people go down the bottle route of dealing with their shit, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. But I didn't realize I was doing it in another way. How's your back feel? Well, it hurts when I don't take these meds. Well, yeah, fucking course it's going to hurt when you don't take the meds. You broke your back in 4 places. But the doctors never said to me, let's start to wean you off. So I just kept taking them and kept taking them. And so 4 or 5 years of taking 2 Oxycontins 3 times a day.
Wow.
So not a lot in the grand scheme of when you look at some of these big time, Friends stars who've taken mass amounts. But if I had taken 2 Oxycontin back in 2008, man, that'd have been a fucking good Friday night. You know what I mean? Like that'd have been crazy. And I was taking these and just living, just maintaining. And then I said, I got to get off these things. And I tried stopping. And it was that moment that I forgave every single heroin addict in the entire world.
Why is that?
Relapses. Because the withdrawals for someone who is dependent, their bodies become dependent on these drugs. You're not a full-on addict where you're psychologically addicted and all that stuff, but you're not going out of control, but you're just taking what you're supposed to be, what you're being told to take, what the doctors are telling you to take. You still have massively severe withdrawal symptoms.
What, like what?
Well, it's not a diuretic or a laxative, but it stops you up, right?
By taking pain pills, you're more prone to becoming
you're halting your
constipated.
poop process, basically. Yeah. So getting off of it, your body is now going to just panic and flush, and you're talking about dysentery level friggin' explosions going on that are just horrific. Pain. I mean, my hair would hurt. It's no friggin' reason for hair to hurt. Everything hurts. You start restless leg syndrome. Oh my fucking God. I could not sit still at night. I could not sleep. I'd be up and down, and it was terrible. And all that made me feel better was taking another pill. So it was really hard to work my way out. And I had to wean off over the span of about a year because I tried at first cold turkey. That shit really, it taught me a lesson. The universe said, no, buddy, like you can't, this is when you want to quit, but you ain't quitting. So I had to go back to doctors to come up with a plan. And I told them, I said, hey, I need to get off these because I'm getting medically retired from the Army.
Yeah.
I'm going to sometime in life need to be on some other medication again, but I'm going to die from this now if I don't stop. I mean, I can only maintain taking what they're prescribing me for so long before it starts to escalate. No one ever has a happy ending with this shit. So it took me a year and a half, cutting down every 2 weeks the dosage that I was taking to a lower level.
Wow.
Getting it down to a dosage that when I did stop, that the withdrawals were only 2 weeks long, not a month. And since 2013, I have not taken a single pain pill or taken any kind of pain therapy in that aspect, any kind of medication, even when I probably should. There are moments where my back will go out. And thank God I work for an IT company because I can call them up and say, hey, I'm working from home.
Yeah.
Because I can't come in, but I will be laid up like that for 4 or 5 days. And you're talking about pain that'll friggin' wake up friggin' the dead kind of shit. And I just won't take them because I just don't want to go through that again. And we could see on a day-to-day basis on TV the news reports about what this opium epidemic has done to people. And I could hold the pharmaceutical companies responsible, sure, and the doctors are definitely just as responsible. But these guys thought they were helping a combat soldier who was injured when they were giving me these meds, and they were doing the best they could to try to help somebody in pain. Because it did take me to say, or me with my wife helping me to realize, hey, this has got to stop, to get off of them. And I'm very lucky that I was able to. But the downside is now that it's there's pain that I have to live through. And I lived through it. Let me say that it's not that I'm not woe is me because I can't take a pain med. My pain that I have, I'm able to live with. And that's life. That's the difference between our generation or the current culture and everyone else, was that of course you're going to get pain as you get older. Of course you're going to have physical disabilities and physical issues when you get older, but you're not going to survive by eliminating them through pharmaceuticals. You're going to survive by learning how to live with what your body is right now and finding ways to do it without having to rely on something that it'd be one thing if it was aspirin or Tylenol, but this is stuff that will kill you. And yeah, would say that, that I had a pill problem, but it wasn't a pill problem in the scheme of I was doing illegal activity. I was buying it from people off the street and all that kind of stuff, but I was doing it under the aspects of prescriptions that were legitimately filled for me.
Yeah.
Just for way too long.
And Jeff, so much to be said here. I do want to point out something. One, since you were 17, you've been in a life of service, or at least for those 18 years, right? You gave so much, and everybody, I'm certain is very thankful for that. But I also want to point out that a couple times on this, during this conversation, as we're wrapping up here, you have shown what I find to be immense amount of grace for others. Whether it be the behavior of others or kind of what you just said about like these people that they were just trying to help me not be in pain. And so I think even as you struggle with pain, as you have, coming up, it sounds like 10 years without any pain pills, even though you're having some pain from time to time, I just think it's a huge kudos to you, and also a huge kudos that you have gone through all of these things. And I'm sure that we're just scratching the surface, and you felt that you wanted to share your story so that somebody else who might be struggling with something similar can know, hey, I'm not alone. Hey, I'm not, I'm not going. So I just want to thank you so much for that, and say that I really admire what you've had to say, and I really admire the perspective that you've come to on a lot of this stuff. And I don't know if I would be able to do the same thing. So huge kudos to you. Is there anything else that you would want to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah. So just two things. One is that I don't want anyone to get the idea of that I regret anything or would do things differently. I mean, that's one of the things my wife says is still a bit weird about me, is that knowing where I'm at now, knowing all the things that have happened, I would still do everything I did the same way. And not because I did it great, but because as I look back on it, I loved my job as being a Green Beret. Loved it. It was the best job I ever had. I didn't join the Army to serve others, but I stayed in the Army because I learned to love it, and I learned to love what I was doing, and did it, and eventually did. But also, I did things the best I could, and I'm not going to regret any decision I make, because that's just going to be another thing I have to deal with this regret stuff. So that is what I would say about my past. Right now, me talking to people about it, which I obviously have no issue with, even some of the stuff that's uncomfortable to me, I'll talk about, because I have figured out, and then I have come to the conclusion that if I spend the rest of my life telling everybody that will listen to me about this kind of stuff, and somebody out there that's struggling with anything near the same thing finds some kind of benefit in it and says, I can do this, I can get past this, because he's just a normal guy and I'm just a normal person, then that'd make every friggin' conversation I ever have, every time I open up and bare my soul to the world, so to speak, that makes it all worth it if just one person gets help. And if you're out there listening and you realize, if you haven't realized, I'm just going to give you the clip notes here. If somebody who had the jobs and the things I did with the under athletic, short, not the standard guy you would think Green Berets would be, can get and suffer and then find a way to live with and go on with this stuff, then so can they. Because if you feel like your life's just normal and you've got stuff going on, well, then try to look at it from the point of view of, I can do it because I don't have any other obstacles in front of me. If you are someone out there who's like me and has this stuff going on, realize that this is the only way for us to get better, is for us to open up and find someone to talk to. Ask somebody for help, because there's nothing wrong with asking for help. Asking for help is a sign of strength. Not asking for help when you need it is a sign of weakness. That's where the sign of weakness is. And that doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're damaged. Go get help. Talk to someone. Send me an email. Somebody. Don't do anything when you're really hurting bad and things are horrible. Give yourself the night to see if you feel the same the next day. Don't choose to go down the road of suicide or take your own life. Just wait one night, and I guarantee you'll feel different the next day. So that's my main message to people.
Wow. I think that's a great thing to end on. I do want to say one more thing. You had mentioned you have a podcast. Do you want to just tell us what that podcast is and where people could find it?
Yeah, my podcast is Hysteria 51. It's in the
no,
sorry. No,
so you host a bad podcast. I see.
No. Although I have been guest on that show 3 times. I host a show called Changing Hearts and Minds. Initially was about my struggle to get out and do all that kind of stuff, but then I have a history degree, and I'm very, very into military history. So it's a military history podcast, and me and my co-host, who's a friend of mine from Chicago, from Boston, we get together and we talk about really in-depth stuff about military history, anything that has to do with it. So, and it could be found. You just look for Changing Hearts and Minds podcast. Or if you want, you can find from was it Go Forth Productions. You can find me on a couple of episodes of Hysteria.
Fourth Hand Productions.
Fourth Hand, Go Forth, whatever it's called. To me, it's just Brent.
Yeah,
I just show up to Brent. My initial thing was I wanted to sniff John, but that never worked out. But
yeah, and if you'd like, we'll put that the link or information about your podcast in the show notes.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on and sharing your story, Jeff.
Thank you for having me and letting me come on, because I really do think your show is remarkable, and in a world where we just want to fool ourselves all the time, it's nice to see somebody out there just keeping things real.
I appreciate that, and I just want to say same thing I always try to close with. There's always room for kindness and grace. I think Jeff has at least through his story he's told us today, I've seen a lot of really strong examples of choosing kindness and grace, even in very difficult circumstances. And I think that's true of all of us, especially, and at least in my case, it's really needed when dealing with myself. So just a reminder that there's always room for kindness and grace. And thanks so much to Jeff. And we will see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to a Fourth Hand Joint.